So today I'm going to do a very highly requested video, and that is Crested Gecko care. So here's a Crested Gecko right here. This is Chip. He is my only frog butt, and I will go over that situation later. But Crested Geckos are one of the best, most popular pet lizards of all time. It's really interesting because these guys were once thought to be extinct, and now they're just like so popular and everyone loves them. They're just the cutest little things. The only thing that I think might scare some people or might lead them away from Crested Geckos is if they're new with reptiles and handling them and they don't like the fact that they jump, because these guys love to jump. They love to go all over the place. So that's something you'll have to get comfortable with. Not all of them are jumpy, but Chip here, like, obviously is not very jumpy and just sits in one spot. So that is why I'm using him for the video. I was going to try to take out like multiple Crested Geckos and like have them on me for this video, but I think that would be more of like a clown act and they would just be like all over and I would be stressed out and it would be a mess. And I'm pretty sure last time I tried doing that I got pooped on, so I'm gonna not do that this time. So let's just jump into the care for these guys. One thing that people love about Crested Geckos is their diet. A lot of people aren't really into doing all of the insects and feeding insects every week. It can be a little expensive and people are just grossed out by it. So Crested Geckos are a great option because they mainly eat a little mixture of powder substance that's called Pangea, or you can use Repashy. I recommend using both and just doing as much variety as you possibly can. There are a ton of different flavors too, and basically it's just a powder that you put water in and you mix it up until it's like a good thick kind of liquidy formula. I'm really bad at describing this. It's the easiest thing ever though. You literally just add water to the powder, mix it up, and then they lick it up, and that is their food. Crested Geckos do still need that protein to grow, so it's important to offer them insects at least once a week, but they're basically just snacks for these guys, and the Pangea or the Repashy is going to give them all of the vitamins and nutrients that they need in their diet. So it's very, very important. A lot of pet stores sell these guys and they just are feeding them crickets or something, and that's not very cool to do because the Pangea and Repashy again has all of their vitamins and nutrients, and the insects are just protein and snacks. While you are going to be feeding the insects, it's important to gut load, which means that you're going to be feeding your insects a lot of vegetation, just vegetables, things that you would feed. I don't know if you're keeping any other reptiles, but what I usually do is I take my beardy salads and whatever I'm feeding my beardy is what I'm gut loading for my crickets. You can also feed them dubia roaches. They love them. They're also very highly nutritious. Superworms, waxworms are just a snack. Hornworms, basically anything, they eat it. Again, every single gecko is going to have their own like things that they like, things that they don't like. So a lot of people message me and they're concerned about what their gecko's eating, and don't worry about it. As long as your gecko's eating something, you're good. If you have a baby Crested Gecko, it can be kind of hard to tell if your gecko is eating or not. The only way to really tell is if there's poop in the enclosure. If there's poop, you know that they're eating and you don't have to be worried. Some geckos will eat out of your hand if you just hold the Pangea up. Others won't. Others are very secretive and like to eat later on. Again, it's never a definite thing. Each gecko is going to have their own little personality and behavior, which just adds to how amazing these guys are. Another thing about feeding the insects, you do want to be coating it with calcium D3 for these guys, because these geckos do not need any lighting whatsoever in their enclosure, which is very amazing. It can get expensive with the lights and confusing for many people. They do not need the heat or the UVB as long as you have a comfortable room temperature of 75 to 80 degrees. They can handle a drop into the lower 70s at night. So as long as you have a comfortable room temperature, you don't have to worry about any additional heating or the UVB. Just make sure that you're supplementing with the calcium D3 in their diet. You just sprinkle that on top of their insects every week and you should be fine. When it comes to setting up an enclosure for a Crested Gecko, you can use paper towel as a substrate or Eco Earth or go bioactive. It's totally up to you. They do fine with either one. For a Crested Gecko, you do want a very tall enclosure. These guys are arboreal creatures. They live up in the trees. They don't spend much time on the ground and they love to climb. So you do want to give them that height within their enclosure. If you have a baby crested gecko, you can keep them in a much smaller enclosure temporarily while they're a baby. Some babies may not be able to find their food in larger enclosures, so whenever you're bumping a gecko up in a different size enclosure that's larger, you just want to keep an eye on them and make sure that they're still eating. Within their enclosure, you do want to make sure that there's a lot of branches and things to climb on and foliage. They want to be able to sleep in there and feel safe and secure during the day. And that is the way to do it. You can go bioactive and do live plants, or you can do fake plants. Another thing about crested geckos is their humidity level. So they need a 60 to 80% humidity, and that goes for the babies and adults. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to spray their enclosure down. You should have a little spray bottle or a misting system. Both work perfectly fine. What's best is to make sure that you're spraying at nighttime, and it depends on your household and your humidity gauge, so you just need to check on it. I used to have to spray my enclosure every morning and night, but since I moved here, I only have to spray at nighttime. Nighttime is the most important time to spray down because these guys do not drink from water bowls. For the majority. There may be a couple that might drink out of a little bowl. I've heard that some do it, but for the most part, that's not what these guys are doing. What they actually do is they just lick the moisture of whatever you missed on their leaves around their enclosure. They just lick it off of the leaves, and that is how they hydrate themselves. So what I do is I use a misting can, and I basically just put water in it, and I use ReptiSafe on everything. You don't want to be spraying chlorinated water on these guys. They need fresh ReptiSafe water, so that's something to keep in mind. You want to spray down their whole enclosure. Just make sure that everything is wet so that way they can lick off everything and just hydrate themselves and be healthy. So as I mentioned earlier, Chip does have a frog butt, which means that he does not have a tail. Crested geckos do not regrow their tails once they've dropped. They're just gone for good, and then they are called frog butts. But it's nothing to worry about. Some geckos just scare more easily than others. It could happen if you're housing multiple geckos together, which I would not recommend doing. They should have their own enclosures. The only time you should keep them together is during breeding, and even then it's just temporary. So Chip dropped his tail before I got him. He was just always like this. I've never had one of my geckos drop their tail while living with me, and I'm thankful for that because I've seen pictures and the tail pops off and wiggles around like a worm, and sometimes the geckos go and attack it, and that whole situation just grosses me out. So I'm glad I haven't had to deal with that, but who knows, it could happen in the future. So I have very exciting news. I just started breeding my crested geckos at the beginning of the summer, and my very first baby hatched. So I will show you guys the footage because I was so lucky and I was able to get the footage of the baby coming out of the egg on video. So I will add that at the end of the video, and you can meet all of my crested geckos. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all of my crested geckos. I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and have a wonderful day.